This is Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley. I'm the fellow who has a hyphen in my name. The hyphen is silent, but I am anything but that. This is episode number 2 of the Introduction to Respectonomics, and this one is entitled Follow the Fallow. Follow is spelled F-O-L-L-O-W. Fallow is spelled F-A-L-L-O-W. Fallow. It's an old-fashioned word, but we're going to talk about the art of going fallow and the process of going fallow. In my experience, what happened was, when I retired, and it was prevailed upon me to write a book, and I started writing this book, it was called A&D, ... The Conjunctions of Life. And I pretty much had it in hand. What I found in due course while I was writing the book, and maybe some of you know this already, I found the book writing me. And as I therefore sat back and started studying the ceiling, studying the stars, studying those vacant spaces of life, I began to formulate very different opinions and very different ideas and different philosophies that I have believed are important and are being brought forward. The experience I had, which I think lasted about 3 months, admittedly wasn't intentional. It happened. It was logistically possible, meaning I had the time, the space, the wherewithal to be able to sit and consider life and think of all the things that were going on. I had that experience. The experience I had was one of going fallow. Now, fallow is an ancient expression. It goes back to the days of Moses, who mandated that the Israelites should, in their farming practices, take one field every 7 years and put it into a fallow state. The practice was copied in medieval farming. It was also by the Victorians. This was actually part of the Industrial Revolution, which coincided with great advances agriculturally. But they still believed in the fallow principle of taking a field and putting it out to rest once every 7 years. It's a practice that we saw in Canada or in North America, lasting through to the 1920s. We moved away from the practice more than anything because of economics. Economics said we need to have the land in full production 24/7. And as a result of that, we stopped going fallow, and we have used different technologies, different grains, different hybrids, different chemicals, different cultivating techniques, all added to which have brought land into full production on a year-round basis. The principle behind fallow land, though, let's take a look at what it was trying to do. First of all, it was intentional. The farmer would talk about his summer crop. He would talk about the wheat or the barley or the corn, but the field that was going fallow would be called summer fallow. In other words, it was going to be going fallow that summer. And one of the critical points is the farmer did not expect to take a yield or a harvest off that field. Now, what he did do was he planted what's called a cover crop. A cover crop could be something like red clover, and there was another one I was trying to think of, but red clover anyway. And he would use that as a cover crop. And the point of the cover crop, buckwheat is what I was thinking of, the point of the cover crop was to prevent erosion, and at the same time it was considered green manure. What's meant by that is that when the plant had come into its bloom and so on, it would then be ploughed back into the land. Now, the purpose of the fallow experience, the fallow process, was first of all to give the field a rest. It was allowing it to resuscitate. It's a word that you hear a bit now, is regenerative. It was allowing the field to regenerate. It was intentional. There was no yield. And it was a passive experience. And by passive, it was allowing the field to be open to the vagaries of nature rather than the incursion of the plough and the seed drill. While the field is fallow, it looks like nothing's happening, doesn't it? But the reality is that underneath that surface, underneath that cover crop, you will see the worms busily working away. And they are the ones that break down the soil. They are the ones that provide the drainage. They provide a certain amount of internal process of manuring themselves. And at the same time, they allow, because of breaking down the soil, it allows drainage to occur better than it would have been. Drainage is very important for two reasons. One is because when you have drainage, you then, the roots can go down further. So when you're putting in a new crop, they can go down further now because the land has been decompressed. But the other reason is that because you've got this drainage system operating, it helps to wash away the toxins. You have the microbes, you have the microorganisms, you have the bacteria, all doing their number. And one of the things they also do is to attack the toxins that are working or have been available, accessible to that land. So nature is really doing a wonderful job. The idea then is that the nutrients are being returned to the land. It's almost like a process of restoration. Interestingly, Respectonomics, its clarion call is to restore the dignity of the human being. In fact, I think a better definition of Respectonomics, its agenda should be to restore the human being, period. When we think of restoration, we think of it the way, you remember when somebody says, I've restored a piece of furniture, is restoring it to the way it was originally intended. And that's one of the purposes of restoration. Part of the fallow process is to restore the land to the place for which it was intended. It also is almost a legal expression of returning what has been taken away. We take a lot of extraction out of the land, and when we extract, this is a process of putting it back. It is a restoration, putting back what was taken away. But there's a third part to restoration as well. The word restore is re and then store, meaning we are putting storage back into the land. You could use a word like restocking, but we are restoring. So you've got these three elements of restoration that are going on in this fallow process. The land is then able, in the years to follow, to be reused for another 6 years. But the Victorians found out something very interesting about this process of being fallow. And they developed what was called the Fallow Protocol. And the Fallow Protocol said that when a field has been fallow, when the farmer was then reseeding it, he would need to seed it back with what it didn't have before. What I mean is, if supposing that field had always been good for producing corn, the farmer would be recommended not to put corn in the first year. In other words, to use something else. And it's an interesting dynamic because you think of restoration of right now we can go back to where we were. And the Victorians said, not so fast. We need to put in another crop, let's say beans, and then we can go back to the corn later on. Now, this entire fallow process, although agricultural in context and the way we've described it, is, of course, a natural process. And anything that has a natural process, one would think definitively has a human equivalency. In my own case, I was able to go fallow for logistical reasons. I say logistical because I had retired. I was able to sit at my desk. I was able to ponder about things, to gaze at the stars, to get out of myself. What I'm going to suggest here is, when you and I are in the business of an organization might be corporate, might be political, it might be a community organization. But you've heard that expression when people say, I'm taking a leave of absence. We need societally to be able to go to corporations and businesses, I'll use them as the touchstone, we need to go to them and explain the benefits of going fallow so that an employment contract, beyond stating your vacation pay and your terms, medical issues and benefits and all those other things, there should also be a possibility of going fallow for a month or 2 or 3, maybe mathematically every 7 years. The reason for doing that is this. How often have you heard that expression? I used to hear it with people who were closing in on retirement. And I would say to them, when are you retiring? And the answer came back with something like, well, in 6 months, 3 days, 2 hours and 48 seconds. And then with a big smile, they would say, no, it's now 47 seconds. The point of the matter is to be looking at retirement from a career in the sense of, I can't wait to get out of here, isn't in itself healthy. And what I have found is that quite often when people say, I can't wait to get out of here, it might be at 5 o'clock in the evening, it might be the example of retirement, it might be the example of going on vacation. But so often that expression of, I can't wait to get out of here, is an expression of burnout. It's the one the field has been overused, over-chemicalized, over-extracted. There's been too much demand on it. The field needs to go fallow. So does the human being. And I believe it is a corporate requirement, a corporate interest, and in fact, a corporate benefit that their employees and staff and so on should have the opportunity to go fallow. Fallow is not the same as going on sabbatical. Going on sabbatical is when you will typically take on a project. You'll go and say, I'm going to go and visit universities for the next year. I'm going to go and visit research facilities. There's a definitive reason for doing it. Fallow doesn't do that. Fallow is literally letting nature take its course. One of the things that I find in this general principle of being fallow is, and maybe you've had this one, is you say you're going on vacation or you're going to be away for a few days. And the question that comes back, there are 2 questions. One is, what are you going to do? And the second one is, well, why would you need to do that? You've been on vacation all your life. And they're both incredibly intrusive, actually very rude statements. When someone says to us, I'm taking a break, I'm going on a holiday, I'm going to take a leave of absence, whatever that general comment is, our response needs to be affirmative and say, that's wonderful. I hope you have a really great time. So we need to be encouraging ourselves to be fallow, we need encouraging other people to be fallow, and we need to understand its defining benefits. If it's true in nature, surely to goodness, it's fair to the human being and successful for the human being. I want to look at now, having said that's the logistical issue, in other words, where we have a corporate ethos that encourages the fallow experience. A lot of us would say it's not going to happen. We're going to say it's not going to happen because the corporation, the business, the government, whatever it is, the political framework, the economic framework does not permit it. So in the sense that I can't get to be fallow in the traditional sense we've talked or discussed, then let's take another look at taking a mini fallow experience. Now, a mini fallow is a personal initiative. It's one where you define yourself as saying, I'm going to have a rest. But I want you to believe one thing. Resting is an activity. Relaxation is an activity. It sounds contradictory. It seems to be almost a conflict. But in fact, to give you an example, you say, I'm going to relax and watch TV for the evening. And I don't know if you've noticed, but at the end of watching TV that evening, your experience is generally one of exhaustion. It is not one of elation. Rest is elating. Rest is rejuvenating. But rest is an activity. And it is best defined in relaxation. Relaxation is, as I say, an activity. And one of the things that is always helpful is to relax the body. When we think of our minds today being full of all these tensions and all of these toxins and parasites and all these nasty things, one of the things we come to find is our body is in a place of tension itself. You find your hands are sweating. You find that your heart is palpitating. You find that your stomach has got these horrible demonic butterflies tearing around inside it. Relaxing the body is a way of bringing the mind also into a state of relaxation. But in order to relax the body, again, it is an activity. It is a question of sitting, and I do this. You sit and you start relaxing your body. You start with your big toe. You start with your big toe because that's at the bottom of your body, and you work upwards. If you'd went the other way around, your big toe would never get a chance to relax because your head would already be asleep. So we start at the big toe and work our way through, and you relax your big toe, you relax your ankle, you relax your knee, relax your calf muscles, relax your femur, relax the small of your back, your spine, and your shoulders and your arms, and you go down to your hands and relax your fingers. But here's the part that I really find very powerful, is relaxing your face. Literally. Relaxing your eyes, relaxing your nose, relaxing your ears, relaxing your temples, relaxing your neck, relaxing your teeth, relaxing your tongue. I should do that. Relax your gums, but relax. And when you go through that exercise and you've relaxed your whole body, then go through 10 seconds of allowing the body to deepen that relaxation even further. One of the things that goes well with relaxation is the way we breathe. Breathing out is a very clever thing to do, because when you breathe out and you make an effort to exhale, the movement of which, if I do it now, it would sound like this. And you breathe out, because when you do that, the stale air goes out, then your reflexes come into play, you take in a deep breath, and you're taking in fresh air. When you take in that fresh air, it is no longer pushing down or against the stale air that's in your body because you got rid of it. So breathing and relaxation are important activities. Removal of self is restorative. We spend a lot of time thinking about ourselves. And when we get into a place of what you might call self-examination, it's almost like you would say, well, I'm looking at myself. Isn't that myself that I'm looking at? What you want to do is to take yourself and disengage from the tensions, the pressures, the issues that are confronting us. It's the strangest thing, but when you take yourself out of the picture, you put more of yourself back in again. It's a bizarre contradiction, isn't it? But it's true. One of the things we find is whatever line of work you're in, line of thought, whether it's in the family, there's always this demand for more, that demand for increased productivity, the demand for doing more. I know one lady who has a very important managerial job in a lumber operation, and her supervisors have said she needs to be working harder. And I think we've all heard work harder in different shapes and forms. You remember those budgets that you get which say, next year we want to see that top line up by 22%. That's our budget for 2000 and whatever. We're always on this skid of why we should be doing more. And one of the joys of Fallow is to take that off the table. Just to present ourselves in an existing state. This is who I am. This is what I am. This is how I am. And we always think about having to do more and meeting our potential, and there's a truth to that. But I don't believe that we can reach our potential until we can be assured of our own selves, that we have that sense of self-being, that sense that, yes, I'm relaxed, I know who I am, I know what I'm capable of, and so on. When we think of the body, and we talk about the Fallow experience, you remember we were talking about toxins and parasites. And I don't think I want to get into the deep psychology and the deep, can't even say it, anatomical details of toxins and parasites, but I'll put this to us. A toxin is inside us. A toxin is something that destroys. It takes everything with it. And we need to be in a cleansing process to get rid of those toxins. The toxins might be very superficial, I say superficially because they seem so obvious, but things like alcohol and sugar. But in fact, toxins can be in the form of relationships, they can be in the form of history of hurt and abuse and all kinds of things. They need to be dealt with. And fallow, of course, is the experience of washing away those toxins. Let us also then be the ones that say, I'm going to let those toxins go. Letting them go is actually a very important issue. How many of us almost hold on to these things? It's like a badge of honor. I went through this terrible time. Yes, we did go through a terrible time, but it's time to let it go. It's a toxin. But I also want to talk about parasites. And parasite comes from the Greek, parasitine. And the para is the part I want you to emphasize, and that is para means alongside. And there are parasites in our lives where people are parasitical, situations are parasitical, they are alongside us. And parasites have one horrible tendency, or truth even, it's not a tendency. A parasite eats its host and will go on eating the host until the host has been destroyed. So if we have parasites in our life, the answer is to move away from them so that they can no longer have an influence in our lives. To me, the obvious person or the obvious example of that is someone who is parasitical. If that is the case, move away from them. When we look at the human body, we're made up of, we've said, and the centerpiece to Respectonomics is, we are made up of body, mind, and soul. That's the three parts of us. And I liken that to the computer world. In the computer world, the body would be considered the hardware. You know, all that sort of stuff that you see with keyboards and screens and other boxes and bits and pieces. That's the hardware. The software that goes along with the hardware is our mind. It's the processing unit. It's the part that hears what I'm saying and processes it. It accepts it, it rejects it, and it enjoys it, whatever your response is. It is the mind that is working through the information that's coming across the wire. That's the software. But the important one is the operating system. We often say to each other, what sort of operating system do you have? And somebody will proudly say, I am a Mac man. And someone else will say, well, no, I'm actually PC, Microsoft, whatever it is. But the key here is the operating system. The operating system is the soul. It's the soul of the human being. And now and again, your computer happened to me this morning. When I started recording, funny things were flashing up on the screen. I rebooted the computer. And our souls need rebooting. Because if the operating system isn't working effectively, you and I will agree the operating system isn't working, the software doesn't have a chance, and the hardware is just good furniture. So, if we need to reboot the soul, we need to think about what is it? What is the feedstock for the soul? The soul needs to be allowed to go fallow just as much as the mind and the body. I can relax my body, we've talked about that. I can relax my mind by disengaging from the parasites and the toxins and the pressures and all those things that are upon us. But I can also allow my soul to go fallow and allow the full efficacy of nature to be visible to my soul, to look at the magnificence of what we're surrounded by, and also to look at the magnificence of what is within me, the human being, because we are remarkable, remarkable inventions, each and every one of us. And I also should add, and you know this, but the fact of the matter is the human being is exclusive. The word you often hear is inclusive. I take issue. It's exclusive. I can prove it. Your thumbprint's different from mine. We are exclusive individuals. We each have a soul, and the soul needs to be rebooted. It needs to be fed. It needs to be looked at in the same way that you would look at a crystal chandelier. Polish it, looking at it, turn on the light, and let it shine. When you looked at the fallow experience, do you remember we heard the idea that we needed to do something different when we came off the fallow process? That's another way of saying do something new. So if you've been doing something, this doesn't need necessarily to change your career. Could. But it also means do something new. Do something different. Because the fallow experience is allowing that new opportunity to come into your perspective, to come into your sights. I find it interesting that Respectonomics came into my sights. I didn't ask for it, but it came in through the fallow process. And you may find other activities that are enjoyable, that which you are passionate, that feed you only by trying something new. And I think when we try something new, it should be done very quietly. This whole fallow experience is passive. It's a proxy on nature, and it doesn't throw itself up in the air and say, look at me. What it does do is it says, look at me by me. I'm allowing myself to be me. I'm allowing myself to be resuscitated. I'm allowing the nutrients to come back into my life. It's a beautiful experience. And when we look at the majesty of nature, we can see how she rejuvenates herself all the time. One comment on that. When you look out of the window and you see something beautiful, there's a tendency to pick up the camera and the iPhone and go snap, snap. I think we should move away from the snap, snap, move away from the screen, move away from all the electronic stuff, and look at that picture. It might be your grandchild coming across the finishing line. It might be the sun rising in the morning. It might be a sunset. Whatever it is, why not take it as a picture in your own heart, in your own soul, and let that be the imprint in your life? Because when we allow nature to be imprinted as a photograph, as an in the moment in our life, that is part of the fallow process. It's the part that identifies us closely and warmly and connectively with nature. I want to conclude this with why I think this fallow is important. You've heard some of it already. But the fact of the matter is, we need to reseed our lives with trust and hope. We need to be looking at a world where we can embrace other people more easily. And if our lives are full of tension and anxiety and dissatisfaction with ourselves, all of these add up to a common issue, that we will not be able to be fully integrated with the capabilities for which we were invented, we were designed. I will go with you and say, if we go fallow, then the new crop that comes in will be one of hope, it will be one of trust, one of confidence. It will be one that spreads itself like manure, and it will be beautiful because not only will it reinvigorate our own lives, it will reinvigorate, it will restore the lives of those around us. What greater calling! I rest my case.